Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rachel, as many of you know, with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. Thank you for being here. A few more folks are still funneling in. Hi, folks. Okay, well, we are very excited to have Beth Doglio running in Washington's 10th Congressional District here with us tonight. You all are pros and have been here with us almost every week, but just very quickly for new folks on the line, a few programmatic notes. If you're comfortable with it, please turn on your videos. We want to see each other and engage a little bit more. Feel free to ask your question at any point during this Zoom video call. Just go ahead, go to the bottom. You'll see a chat icon. It'll say Rachel, PCC host, and send me your question, and then Beth will be able to answer it directly when we get to the Q&A session. So I'll call on your name and ask you to unmute yourself, and then you can ask Beth your question directly, and she's eager to get to those. So we will be live streaming this. We'll also be recording this, so if you are jumping in a little bit late or you have to jump off a little bit early, no worries. We will send you the full video recording so you can watch it at your convenience later. So please forgive me in advance if I cannot get to all of your questions. We're going to try our very best, but I promise if we don't, that my email will be sent to you. And that way, if we don't get to it, or if you want to volunteer, get more engaged with the campaign, I will connect you to the best person on Beth's campaign, and we'll make that happen. So before we dive in, I think most of you folks know these calls don't cost anything, but we really do hope and deeply appreciate if you're inspired by what you hear from Beth tonight, that you'll consider chipping in what you can. That'll go a long way and will be maximized by Beth and her campaign. So if that's something you can consider, thank you very much. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to our co-founder, Dr. Stephanie Taylor, to share a little bit more about Beth. Stephanie?
Hello, everybody. Great to see everybody again, and welcome to some of the new faces that I see joining us for the first time tonight. We're so excited tonight to be speaking with Beth Doglio, who is running for Congress in Washington's 10th Congressional District. This is an open blue seat. It is to replace the current Democratic representative, Denny Heck, who's retiring. This is a very crowded primary. There's currently, I believe at last count, 19 candidates. And this is a really important race. The top two vote getters in the primary, no matter the party, go on to the general election. So it could be two Democrats running against each other. It could be a Democrat and a Republican running against each other. And it's a crucial primary because just like the primary that Mondaire Jones won last week in New York, this is one of the few opportunities that we have this cycle as progressives to see a progressive elected to an open blue seat. And those opportunities are exciting and rare, and we need to take advantage of them and make sure that we elect progressives into those positions. So let me tell you a little bit about Beth, because I'm very excited about her. She's awesome. She is a state representative. She's a climate activist. For many years, she led the Power Past Coal campaign to work with grassroots leaders and tribal leaders to stop coal from moving through Seattle ports. As a state representative, she was instrumental in passing legislation to make Washington powered by 100% clean energy by the year 2045. She's worked on legislation to make it easier for part-time state employees to organize. And one of the things that's most exciting to me about her is that she has a very intuitive and real understanding of how to work effectively hand in hand with grassroots in an inside-outside partnership. She told me this incredible story, and Beth, I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here, about the first bill she introduced, which was a police accountability reform bill, as a newly elected state representative. And she did it because she was working in coalition with grassroots activists, these same grassroots activists who camped out overnight outside the Capitol to make sure it was the first bill introduced in the new legislative session. That's the kind of organizing mentality that we need in Congress. So Beth will be an incredible addition to Congress. And I'm so excited that she's running, and I'm so excited that you get to meet her tonight. So with no more ado, please meet Beth Doglio.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you so much for being here. to learn a little bit more about me and this campaign. I currently serve in the 22nd Legislative District, where I've lived with my family and raised my family for over 2 decades. The 22nd is fully encompassed within the 10th Congressional District and makes up about 25% of the district, just to give you a little grounding in where we are. Olympia, Tacoma, Shelton are sort of the key places in the 10th. But I did grow up, just a little background, I grew up in a little town in Illinois, and both of my parents were educators, which definitely gave me a strong sense of how important education is. And in middle school, my mom was an activist in her own right. She was involved in a campaign to create a public health department, if you can imagine that, in Kankakee County, where I grew up. And she took me out door to door, knocking on our neighbors' doors, asking people to support. I imagine it was kind of a tax to support the creation of the public health department. And so from that very young age, I learned that you really have to take responsibility for the kind of future, for the kind of society that you want. And that has been instilled in me since that age. And so if I am lucky enough to represent the 10th Congressional District in Congress, I will fight for a new future, a future that really invests in people and not more profits for the wealthy. So the first thing I committed to was, I'm not taking corporate PAC dollars. I think corporations have enough influence in DC, they sure as heck don't need more. And that does differentiate me from my opponents. Now, we're all living with the pandemic and high unemployment rates, and the racial unrest in our country. And I think the inequities in our nation have just been laid bare by all of these things that are intersecting right now. And so we can see clearly what it means to have no paid sick days, what it means to not have paid family leave. Now in Washington State, we have one of the best family leave bills across the nation. And I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that we implement a paid family and medical leave act nationally. I was instrumental in helping that move forward in the state legislature, and I will be working doggedly at the congressional level if I'm elected. And as a result of that work, Stephanie mentioned the bill that I did that allows part-time state employees to organize. I do enjoy and having earned the sole endorsement of the Washington State Labor Council, along with UFCW, that represents grocery store workers and nurses. Our state employees have endorsed, and also the machinists and IBEW. Healthcare, huge issue, right? It is literally, when we are out talking with voters, it is the #1 issue. And I think we can see clearly, we couldn't see it before, which I did see it before, and I'm sure many of you saw it before. Healthcare tied to employment has got to go. And I'm the only candidate in this race who unequivocally supports Medicare for all, an expanded Medicare for all that covers vision, dental, hearing. It's crazy that I have a friend who has laryngeal cancer, very unfortunate. And he and his wife both have good insurance, and they came up with $10,000 worth of expenses that they couldn't cover and had to do a GoFundMe campaign like so many people. That is outrageous. When the average healthcare CEO made $7.7 million last year and people are struggling to pay their deductibles and their premiums, we've got to change the system. It simply isn't working. So I'm proud to have also earned the endorsement of Representative Pramila Jayapal and Senator Bernie Sanders, and I look forward to working on Medicare for All when I'm elected. Now, I have been a long time, 30 years, an advocate working with grassroots organizations. I'm a community organizer at heart, and that's what I will bring to Congress. I was the first executive director of Washington Conservation Voters in our state in 1991. And I've spent the last 13 years working as the campaign director at Climate Solutions. I'm the only leading candidate that has the depth of knowledge and experience in actually passing policies that Stephanie mentioned to create our fossil-free future. And also, in the coal campaign, I took on the fossil fuel industry and we won. we stopped 7 coal export facilities up and down the West Coast from ever coming, dead in their tracks, from ever coming to fruition. So again, super proud. I have the endorsement of the League of Conservation Voters, Sunrise, and the Sierra Club. Now, I would be the first LGBTQ, openly LGBTQ member of our elected in Washington State. It's far too long that we haven't elected someone who is LGBTQ, but this is an opportunity to do that. And I am working day in and day out at night to be an inclusive policymaker, taking on economic, gender, and racial inequities in our nation. Stephanie mentioned the story about working with the Black Alliance of Thurston County to introduce the very first bill on police accountability. I am committed to that work, both as a state legislator right now, because I still hold that position, and we may come into special session to address some of that and go beyond what we've done already here. And also, I'm looking forward to working on that in Congress. So just a couple of quick issues before I wrap up. Got to save the post office. Really want to take Washington's great vote by mail system and move that across the nation. I will continue, as I have on the House floor, speaking out about for-profit prisons and detention centers. Clearly, there's a ton of work to do to reform immigration, and I am committed to finding pathway for many to become citizens if that's what they choose. So I am really looking forward to having more conversation and answering any questions that you might have.
Oops, I was muted. Sorry, folks. Thank you, Beth. So let's kick this off with a question from our friend Norbert Hornstein on climate. Mr. Hornstein, what's your question for Beth?
Yeah, so climate change, like the pandemic, is not merely a national issue, but an international issue. One of the things I've noticed is that even when people speak about the Green New Deal, they don't discuss how we're going to get Russia and China and Brazil and India to work with us, or we work with them to solve this issue. What would you do to sort of make that cooperation more realistic? And how would you move the Democratic Party, which is actually quite unpleasant when it comes to issues of international cooperation, in a direction that would make climate change not just pissing in the wind, but really something that could save us from going over the edge?
Well, that is a fantastic question. Clearly, we have been working, for the past several decades as an international community to move forward an agreement, which of course, we are not part of the Paris Agreement, the United States, and obviously we're not doing our part, and we certainly need to re-enter that. But, that doesn't go far enough. We do not have a lot of time left. So I think one of the things, as we're looking at the stimulus package, we need to invest heavily in putting people to work to build out our own structure in terms of moving us towards a fossil-free future, but also starting to invest in actually being a manufacturer of, of all the technologies that will help us to address climate change and to really get a handle on our greenhouse gases from an international. So we should be exporting that work. We should be leading that work. I think that, we need to start by getting rid of Trump, because there's no way we can have international conversations with someone like Trump at the top. So I know that all of you on this call are doing everything you can and investing in that. That is the first step in terms of how we figure out how we move forward on any kind of an international conversation around really addressing climate change. But we have so much work to do here, like you mentioned, in terms of just getting our own Democratic Party, really coalesced around how we are going to move our own country towards a fossil-free future. We're the #2 emitter, right after China. And so we have so much work that we can do. If we are doing our own part, we are making a huge dent. Clearly it's not enough, like you said, Mr. Hornbeam, but I think we need to really dig in and start those conversations and have those conversations at a much, much higher level. And it does start with the top here, congressional and Senate leadership, as well as presidential leadership, to really drive those conversations and bring people to the table and continue having them until we have agreement that the direction we need to move is towards a fossil-free future.
Thank you, Norbert. Thank you, Beth. Up next, we have Mr. Sean Dennerlin. Sean, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself, sir. And Sean, what's your question for Beth?
Thanks so much, Rachel. So hi, Beth. I was just wondering, as you may know, that your congressional district that you're running in now has the highest density of veterans in the entire nation outside of the congressional district making up the state of Montana. And so knowing that and knowing that you have the third largest military installation in the US, what are you doing and what are some of your plans around veterans in the military population that make up those demographics?
Yeah, thanks, Sean, for that question. So for those of you who don't know, JBLM, Joint Base Lewis McChord, is fully encompassed within the 10th Congressional District. And it brings in a very large number of veterans and service members. And we also have such a lovely place that we live that once folks come here to serve, a lot of times they end up staying here. And so we have that is a blessing, and it also puts a lot of it is challenging for housing. Our housing costs are super high, and we have a very high number of people, veterans included, who are homeless. And so one of the things that I've done as a state legislator and will continue as a Congress member, and I did not talk about this in my opening remarks, is I've been a huge advocate for housing policies. As the vice chair of the capital budget, I have driven in nearly $300 million into our housing trust fund. And I passed the #1 housing bill for the Washington Housing Alliance and have earned their endorsement as well. The housing, I think, is a huge issue for our veteran and service population. And Denny Heck actually has really risen has really highlighted that issue. And I will continue to work on housing issues at the federal level. Okay. And then in addition to that, there are a number of people on the base that I'm aware of that I will be a strong advocate for. We have some issues with the we're doing a lot of development for rail, and we need to really make sure, because the base is intersected by I-5, we need to invest in infrastructure, putting people back to work, and building infrastructure to make sure that there is smooth transportation between the two sides of the base. And we have some issues at the north end of the base around the base being too close to a high urban density. And so we have work to do in that space. And then I also just want to say, I think our dollars are best spent investing in veterans and service members, healthcare, access to education, housing, and mental health in particular. And we are not doing a good enough job in this country in addressing those issues for veterans. And I think we need to invest in our people, not in weapons of mass destruction. So those are the kinds of values that I will carry into my work with the base. I've spent time on the base. I've spent time talking with veterans, hearing about that. And, you know, there's also the issue of sort of the whole suicide. I have some constituents who are dealing with their spouse having committed suicide. We need to work to make it okay for people to access mental health care and on the base. And so those are some of the things that I'll work on, Sean. And look forward to working with you on many of those issues.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's keep it going with the great questions. All right, next we have our friend Robert Frame. Robert, sir, what's your question for Beth?
Hi there, Beth. I'm heartened by your core belief in making it easier for workers to organize, so that you got a big yes with an exclamation point from me. I noticed one of your primary components in something I was reading was called Another Progressive, and had some labor support too. And I'm just curious how you compare your strengths to her strengths. And when I was reading what I thought, and gosh, this is the top 2 vote getters, and here's 2 good progressives. How do you kind of perceive that you can avoid a split progressive vote that's going to harm you?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it is tough. So one of the advantages that I have over that particular opponent is that I actually live in the district. So she does not live in the district. She doesn't even live in a county that's in the district. So that is a clear difference between the 2 of us. I've worked, lived, represented this district, 25% of it. I've been here for the last 4 years, and then as an activist for years and years and years. I think the other thing that really differentiates us is that I have a legislative record of actually working on policy in the labor space and actually passing bills like the bill that allows state employees, part-time state employees to organize. So that was part of a suite of bills that the labor movement worked to put forward. There were about 6 of them after the Janus decision. So I'm proud to have been the prime sponsor of that and actually gotten that across the finish line. I also spent 2 years on the Labor and Workforce Standards Committee. So when I talk about the paid family leave and being part of that bill, I was actually the person assigned on the committee to help move that through the committee. And was always like number 2 on that paid family leave bill. And then I have done a tremendous amount of work with the building trades. Environmentalists and building trades do not always see eye to eye. And I have the support of many unions in the building trades and also individuals, just because I've put the time in to build the relationships, to listen, to try and really understand where they're coming from and how the work that I'm doing on moving us towards a fossil-free future works in partnership, hand in hand with labor, because we are not going to fix this situation if we are not working hand in hand with low-income communities and with labor. I mean, we really, and that was the beauty of the 100% bill that we passed here in Washington State. It has equity measures in it, first in the nation, and it has labor standards in it. So there's tax incentives in there, in that bill, that are, you get a certain percent of tax incentive based on what your labor standards are around the contracting that you do in terms of that project. So it's pretty cool stuff. I'd love to be able to do this at the federal level. And I think, I just have much more experience and was much more dedicated, even like attending working family caucus meetings on a regular basis, strategizing with with the labor union advocates on a regular basis during every session. So that's a little bit about what differentiates me.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Beth. Up next, we have our friend Richard Blake. Richard, sir, what's your question for Beth? Richard? Richard? Richard, can you hear us? Okay, I will ask Beth your question for you, Richard. So Beth, Richard would like to know, will you support, two parts, will you support We the People Amendment? And the second part, can you talk a little bit more about supporting the restoration of progressive taxations to levels such as were the case in the 1950s?
So I wish Richard would come up. So I'll talk a little bit about the progressive taxation. So clearly we need to let go of we need to get rid of the Trump tax package, because clearly that was, just helping out the wealthy in this country and not working families. And then in addition to that, I really believe that and this again is a policy that I introduced, it did not pass, but that CEO pay gap that is so out of balance in this country, we really have to address that. And so I actually put together a bill that that would have slapped a B&O tax surcharge onto companies whose CEO make 50 times more than their average employee. And then it goes up, the surcharge goes, that's a 10% surcharge, and it goes up to 25% surcharge when the CEO makes 100 times more than their average employee. That's the kind of thing, those are the kinds of policies that we need to really start to dig into and figure out how to make, how do we, you know, hopefully the idea is not necessarily to tax them, but to really shrink that gap between, you know, CEOs and their average employee. But we absolutely do need to tax people as well. So corporate tax are too low. There's the inheritance tax that needs to be changed and increased. There's the capital gains tax. You know, all of this money that sort of comes to wealthy people that they are not actually working for, while we have people working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet and put food on their family's table. We just basically need to figure out how to redistribute some of the wealth in this country, because we cannot continue to go down this path with so many people who are, you know, working hard to put food on the table and not getting by very well. So, I mean, that's a basic, you know, we definitely need to raise the level of, you know, where we go in terms of upper income people. I think we're at like 34% now. That certainly needs to rise back to levels that we had pre 30 years ago, when we started to really mess around with our tax system. So those are some of the ideas that I have and things that I've been working for and talking about on the campaign trail since I started running for office, and even prior to that. And then, well, yeah, I will stop there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question, Richard, and thank you, Beth. Up next, we're gonna move into healthcare. We have a question, Beth, we have a question from our friend, Kate Villers. Kate, I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself, and what's your question for Beth?
Hi, Beth. I see you're a policy person, and I really appreciate your statements already about healthcare. In a reformed system, which is you're calling Medicare for All, what role do you think the Medicaid program is going to be playing, given that it is the only public health insurance program we have right now? It provides pretty comprehensive coverage for people who are eligible. And another state voted just today to pass a constitutional amendment providing the guaranteed access to Medicaid. That's the state of Oklahoma, a red state. So I'm wondering what your view of Medicaid is in the first place. And given that it's already trying to accomplish a lot of the things that Medicare for All would, but just for a limited group of people, what do you think its role will be in a reform system?
Yeah, interesting question. So, you know, right now, about 2/3 of our health system is paid for by the government, and that's Medicaid, Medicare, and then incentives for insurance companies. And so, you know, we actually already have the makings from a financial perspective of about 2/3, you know, 2/3 of a healthcare system, a public healthcare system already exists. Of course, we'd have to, you know, take those incentives to private insurers away and move that towards a public system. But what I think in terms of the very specific question around Medicaid is that ultimately we would be moving people onto a Medicare system, and that would include people who are currently on the Medicaid system. But we absolutely need to protect the Medicaid system until that transition happens. And I think that transition happens over, you know, it is a longer term transition. We move people sort of by age onto the Medicare system, making sure that those who are the most vulnerable in our communities and are receiving Medicaid continue to receive those services. Now, one of the issues with Medicaid is that the reimbursement rate is so low, for physicians, that it is difficult to find physicians who actually take Medicaid patients. And so we need to at least raise the Medicare reimbursement rate to match the Medicare reimbursement rate, which also happens to be a little bit low in some instances. And because that has been actually an issue in my community, the community just to the west of me, Grace Harbor community, it's like, I don't know, I think it's 80% of their kids are Medicaid, and the pediatricians in that community could not make ends meet, and so they closed their doors. And many of those children were coming into our community, and our pediatricians were getting overwhelmed with kids. And so they came to me and said, you know, we need to raise these Medicaid rates so that we can, you know, share this, you know, share the care for low-income kids. And so I went to bat for that, working with the pediatricians, and raised those rates for primary care for Medicaid kids. And you know, it has helped to get more healthcare provided for the kids who are come from low-income families. So the other problem, though, with Medicaid that I want to talk about is, you know, I have one of my family members, my husband's family member, was struggling, middle class, struggling, and sitting in a doctor's office with folks who had full coverage, Medicaid coverage, as we would envision with Medicare for All, and yet they were having to pay, you know, $1,000 per person in their family to just get coverage. And so it's this when you have these sort of arbitrary income lines around who gets healthcare, access to healthcare, you know, subsidized healthcare in this country, and who doesn't, it becomes very challenging for those people who are on the lower end of the income structure, but are not able to access those services. And so by having a universal healthcare system where everyone is covered, then we take that away. So that's another thing about Medicaid that I think is really important to recognize, just that sort of arbitrary income line that kind of puts families at risk who are moderate income but still are having a hard time finding, you know, being able to pay their premiums and their healthcare.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you, Beth. Up next, we have a question from Joel Carlson. Joel, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to mute yourself, sir. And what is your question for Beth?
Okay, the House just passed a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill, and Trump it'll do a lot for the environment, but Trump is threatening to veto it. How do we save it and make this law?
Well, we get rid of Trump. That's what we got to do. And then we need to take back the Senate, because I don't believe that the Senate has, you know, also, you know, we have to get it through the Senate. So that is super important. And then we need to continue to elect champions and progressives to Congress to make those bills even stronger. And, you know, we're all looking forward with bated breath to take back this nation in 2021 and to get hard at work. And that is exactly why I am running. I do not want to miss the chance to see 2021 with an opportunity to actually move progressive legislation. We're going to have to get on it right away. And we need people with experience, people who have stood up to special interests, people who hold strong progressive values, but know how to work across the aisle and caucus to get it done. So there you go, Joel. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Beth. Okay, up next, we're moving into some foreign policy here now. Up next, we have a question from our friend, Scott Walker. Scott, sir, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. Scott, what's your question for Beth?
Hi, Beth. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
you're very well-spoken, clearly a policy wonk, and on all the right sides of the progressive domestic issues. Is there a member of Congress currently whose foreign policy you would like to emulate?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. Do you have some suggestions for me?
Nope.
No, you don't? Well, I don't know that I have an answer to that question, Scott. Can I get back to you on that?
That'll be fine.
Yeah, I'll have to really start to, I'll have to pay more attention and think through who that might be.
I think that you're right to pay attention to domestic policy on the campaign trail. That's what's going to catch the voters' attention. But in your district particularly, you're going to be called upon to show some leadership with foreign affairs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about that, particularly since JBLM is smack dab in the middle of the district. And Scott, I'll just be really honest with you. I have a lot of learning to do in foreign policy, a lot. But I am up to it, and I'm a quick study, and I am going to be paying, I am going to really, continue to dig in there. Spent a lot of time working on the Palestinian-Israeli issue in particular. And that I think that's the most complex, foreign policy issue that we have. But anyway, I would love to talk with you more about foreign policy.
It's a deal.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you. Up next, we're going to go down another path and switch gears a little bit more. From our Facebook Live, we have a question from Kathleen. Kathleen asks, Beth, should police departments have military equipment?
No. No, they should not. That's an easy one. I mean, there's lots of other things I could say about it, but absolutely not. And I think we really need to have a deep community conversation with impacted families about how we move forward on imagining public safety and what that looks like for every single person that lives in this country.
Thank you. Up next, we have a question from Vic. I think we have time for a few more questions we're gonna try and get in here. Victoria chatted me. Victoria wants to know, Beth, what can we do to stop the oil companies from drilling in public lands?
We need to put a moratorium on them. So one of the things that we did in the coal campaign that was really interesting was we put a lot of pressure on Sally Jewell, who was managing the coal leasing system, to actually put a moratorium on coal leasing. And, even as activists, working with my colleagues on the coal campaign in Montana and Wyoming, we did not think that that was a possibility. But under the Obama administration, Sally Jewell moved to put that moratorium on. That's the same kind of thing that we need to do around drilling on our public lands. I think there needs to be a moratorium on that. We certainly should not be drilling for oil on our public lands. And there's a lot of more things that I would love to do in the public land department as well. But that was one success we had during the Obama administration, during the coal campaign. So it is possible we can make these things happen. And it does take standing up to the oil industry and the fossil fuel industry as a whole, which is something I can't wait to do. Continue doing, I should say.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Okay, I'm gonna sneak in. I think maybe folks are G-chatting me. So I'm gonna sneak in a few more if we can. Well, here's one. So what are your thoughts on breaking up big tech? Rahik is asking, what do you feel about breaking up big tech?
Well, that's a big question, big tech question. It's kind of interesting. I have not been asked that question yet. So this is going to be kind of off the top of my head. So just give you a sense of my values and a little bit of my background. I actually have a telecommunications degree from Indiana University, and I spent a lot of time really looking at the breaking up of, of Ma Bell at that time. And sort of, we see kind of, sort of what happened after the breakup of that. It created all kinds of, like just exploded, right? So I feel like, I'm very concerned about the monopoly that Amazon right here in my own backyard is, has and is continuing to try and take over everything. And I am all about fighting Amazon. And I was so furious at the way they were treating their workers early on in the COVID that I actually had a bill written that would just tax Amazon. And that is part of what I think our Washington State's solution is to dealing with the the $8 billion that we are losing in this state due to the downturn in the economy, is actually taxing Microsoft and Amazon to sort of fill in some of those holes, because they are making money hand over fist. So again, not been asked that question before, and would love to have a conversation with you about your thoughts about it.
Great, thank you so much. We have thrown a bunch of questions your way. Thank you so much. We want to, hopefully you thought that was fun. I think we all thought it was fun, but we want to be respectful of your time. Beth has a debate tonight, so hopefully this was good ramp up for that. Let me go ahead and kick it over to Stephanie Taylor. I know she wanted to share a few final thoughts with you all.
Oh, great. Thanks, Rachel. So thank you to everyone for the great questions, and to Beth for your thoughtful answers. Hopefully everybody here saw on this call why Beth would be such a valuable member of Congress and of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. One final question for you, Beth. Your primary is August 4th. As we've talked about a lot on this call, it's a really complicated primary. There's a lot of candidates in the race. It's really important for you to have a really strong showing. What the money that you're raising right now, how are you going to put it to work? How will the money that you're raising right now help you win? And do you have any other final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Well, first, I thank you so much for being here, for asking me these, actually excellent questions. It always makes me realize how much more I have to learn. And I hope that you also recognize that I'm only as good as the people, as my constituents and those who care about these issues help me be. And so the more that I can learn from you and from constituents, the better policymaker I can be, the harder I can fight for our progressive values. And I just need to get there. And so this campaign is complicated. 19 people. I am raising money to be able to talk directly to voters in this strange world that we're campaigning in as much as I can. I can only get into people's homes, not by doorbelling, but with mail and with media and with people on the phones talking about this campaign. And so every dollar that I raise from here on out in July will be put towards direct voter contact to help get the message out, to help try and rise above the fray so that it is potentially not two Democrats moving into the general election. That is a possibility if I can get enough of the votes, and that a Republican sort of rises and takes second slot, or whatever slot, first, second, and once that happens, this is a very strong Democratic district, and we will be able to prevail in the general election. So that's what I'll use the money for. It is for direct voter contact, and that's mail, media, and meeting people on the phone as much as we possibly can. And again, I really thank you, and thank you for the really interesting conversation and questions. Very thoughtful, very interesting.
Thank you so much, Beth. And thank you to Stephanie. Stephanie created this idea to bring the candidates to you in your home. So we wouldn't be here without Beth and Stephanie. So thank you to them. But most importantly, thank you to everyone that has joined us tonight. And as Beth said, has asked such thoughtful questions and shown such deep curiosity about Beth and her race. So please, if you can, consider chipping in what you feel comfortable with. Super easy. It's in your chat box. Every dollar will be maximized by Beth and her campaign. So if that's something you can do, please consider doing that. Someone just said, Scott, thank you. Beth, Scott said, thank you for finding a great candidate for us. Someone else just G-chatted me. How can I share this with other folks? Don't worry, I will follow up with you with the recording of the video so you can share it with your bring Beth to your friends. So with that, folks, we're going to close out this great call with Beth. Thank you so much for all your engagement, your support. Until next Wednesday, stay safe, stay well, stay positive, and thank you. See you all next week. Bye, folks.